New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here today with you, whether you're here for the first time or you're back because you enjoy these great deep dive conversations that we have here at the Growing Edge. We talk to amazing people from all walks of life that are channeling their time, their talent, their energy, their resources, their creativity, and most importantly, their love into doing good work in the world. And today we have a couple of guests. They've joined us before and they're back, and there's some dear friends of mine, some colleagues of mine, Linda Frazee and Michelle Medrano. And today our topic is healthy relationships. And this is one of the most relevant topics for us as humans to understand more about ourselves, the people in our lives, to know what we're doing and why we're doing it in regards to our connections, our relationships, whether that be in our workplaces or at home, or our ministries. And so I'd love to welcome Michelle Medrano and Linda Frazee, who happen to be mother and daughter, and two individuals that I am so fond of. We've worked together very closely. Linda is my teacher and mentor of the Enneagram, and Michelle, her daughter, who has been a co-student or a classmate of mine in our training. And that was a few years ago, a couple of years ago now. And so welcome, ladies.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to see you, and it's good to be together here on New Thought Media Network, our wonderful production. So, Michelle, you are one of the lead ministers at Mile High Church in Denver. And Linda, you are a personal coach and have a lot of training in transpersonal psychology and imagery. And so I'd love for each of you to share a little bit about the work you do. And then we'll get on to our topic, which is healthy relationships. So, Michelle, why don't you start? Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I've been a New Thought minister now for 34 years and in this teaching of the science of mind, and have loved that work. And I think part of why I love that work is that it is so much about relationships. Of course, ministry and serving people in spiritual community is about, I often say, supporting people through some of the biggest transitions often of their life. If we talk, say, ceremonies like weddings and baptisms and funerals and memorials, but also supporting people in the journey of their life in between those, in the dash, if you will, between birth and death. And it's a great honor to me to be able to do that and to then help people with these New Thought principles that I think are so powerful and impactful, that when people learn them, they can have the life they really want to lead by practicing what we teach. And then adding the Enneagram, being a certified Enneagram teacher, as you are now, to that just helps me understand myself and other people better. So all of this is a huge part of what motivates me. It's about creating healthy, joyful relationships. I'm a people person, so that's important to me.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that. And how about you, Linda? What are you up to these days?
Well, my background is that I'm completing my 43rd year with working in psychotherapy with people, as you mentioned, with transpersonal focus and imagery, and I've been a speaker across the nation. When my thesis as a professional speaker was, if you don't grow your emotional self, you'll never be happy. And that was in the late 70s and early 80s. And my friends would say, and does anybody ever respond to that? And they did. So now it's very common. So that's basically been my work all along the way, has been about growing yourself. And the Enneagram just adds such another dimension. And so I've been teaching the Enneagram now for 30 years and certifying students, helping them become certified. I think it's probably, I don't think probably, yeah, at current time, it's the best system there is on the planet for understanding yourself primarily and others. And as you both have heard me say, I think there's at least 10 levels deep with the Enneagram. It's not, it might seem on the surface to be very superficial, but it's very deep. And I might be at level 4 or 5. I don't know if I'll make it to level 10 while I'm still alive, but I'm going to investigate all that. So what I do is I see people individually, as Ali's mentioned, coaching them through very life things, very much like Michelle. It's another form of ministry. You're both ministers. I guess I'm a minister in that way too. And I work with some couples, which is and sometimes families, which is very interesting to see the dynamics of how the Enneagram plays out in relationships there. And Michelle and I and you are all in the same center of the Enneagram because of the 3 centers. And that makes a big difference. So I want to talk a little bit about that today.
Wonderful. Well, I know we will dive in, and maybe we could start with Linda. You have been working for so many years with individuals and bringing in the Enneagram to help them to understand themselves more deeply. And people, well, I can think of myself, but a lot of us come to therapy because we are having, difficulty in our lives. And I would imagine for the most part, our relationships are all wrapped up in that too. And so what do you think, why is knowing about the Enneagram and what your leading type is, why is that important when people are in a struggle or a challenge? And, what have you seen with your clients over the course of the last couple of decades? Why is it so helpful?
Well, there's a couple things. The first thing is, then there's a variety of assessments that I actually taught many years ago before I found the Enneagram, and that anybody in business gets, like the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and the Strength Finders and all kinds of things. But I think any of those are helpful, including the Enneagram, just number one in relationships, to get that other people don't view life the way you do. And it never ceased to amaze me that we really think they do it, and they should. And if they just did, there wouldn't be any problem if you just do it my way and if you see it my way. And when it comes to relationships, be that mother, daughter, husband and wife, son and father, whatever it is, it's like the automatic arguments that we have are usually the same argument all the way through the relationship. It's always gets back to that. And it's like, you can't feel like you're being heard if you're presenting a viewpoint that the other person doesn't even know exists. And it never ceases to amaze me that people don't really get the complexity of the fact that we are really looking through different eyes. I think the Enneagram has done one of the best it does one of the best things about revealing that. And then the understanding and compassion, if you really get that other people do not look at the way you do, and they shouldn't, and they don't have to, it helps. So it's a really good starting point.
Can you give us an example of how, let's say, two people that might be having some issues within their relationship, sort of maybe showcase a couple of the different types and how they might struggle with communication?
Have you got a few hours? Can we double the time? So, well, one of the ones that comes up right now when I think about this was one that was really rewarding to work with. I had a mother and a daughter. The daughter was not driving yet, so mother had to pick her up after school. Mother was a 2, which is the helper in the Enneagram, and is going toward people and going toward her daughter and wanting to do good things. And the daughter was a 5. And she was pulled back in, didn't want to have a lot of people, doesn't like to have people coming toward her to ask for things or to take care of her. And this was a very wealthy family in Scottsdale. And so mother would love to go shopping, and she'd buy the girl all these wonderful clothes. And then she'd pick her up at school. And the first thing the mother would say to the daughter is, well, how was your day? Tell me about it. And daughter would just clam up immediately. It was really, and then when they would get home, she'd say, look, I bought you this. And the daughter would look at the price tag and go, I don't need a blouse for $100. That's ridiculous. And the mother was like, oh, but I'm just loving you. And so here the mother as a 2 is loving the child in her way of loving by, well, we could use a love language is what this too, but by giving gifts, by doing this wonderful thing, thinking of her daughter all day long. I wonder if she would, and the daughter was like insulted by it, irritated by it, and was very conservative with money. Well, the mother was like, oh, we'll just spend everything we can. And the daughter was like, no, that's energy. So it was really interesting to work with them and to discover that. So that's one illustration. And so they learned to work with each other about that. And the mother learned to contain herself so that when the girl got in the car, she just didn't say, oh, tell me everything, which was just a confront to this girl. So that's one. And then
I'd love to say something about that.
Yes,
it's so intriguing the mother, it sounds like, and you mentioned the love language, the mother showing her love in the way that she felt, probably the way she would like to experience, love and attention, only to have her daughter receive it in a way that she probably thought was unappreciative, that was cold, that wasn't grateful, and the daughter to receive all of that energy and attention and extravagance when those things aren't as top of mind or a value. They're actually things that she's not so keen on. You could see how that could create a barrier, a rift, disconnection, and anger and frustration, and sadness.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And then here's another illustration. And this, unfortunately, it's just coming to mind now that the woman in this is also a 2. Which I could come up with some other ideas. Michelle sure can too. Married to a 6. And so the two woman is also very, very optimistic. All 2s are like, oh, wow, this is going to be so much fun. And the 6 is like, I don't know, very cautious, do we want to know all the facts? And so this was a gestalt I did in front of a workshop. So they volunteered. And because they had a hard time going on vacation. Because the 2 would plan it and would get all these exciting things. And the 6 was like, oh, no, and seeing all the things that were wrong. So they acted it out. So the woman says, we're going to drive to Alaska. And they lived in Arizona. We're going to drive to Alaska and it'll be fun. And the husband says, how long will that be? And she says, oh, it'll be fun. And we'll just stay along the way. And he said, but there's, that's a big place. And she said, maybe we'll see animals. And he went, animals? What kind of animals? And she said, well, I don't know, but they'll be great and there'll be nobody. And he said, what about gas? Where are we going to get gas? And so this was just a snippet of their relationship. And the funny thing about it, at the end of that gestalt, was that they both agreed at the end of once they go on these vacations, the wife was always disappointed, like, well, it really wasn't as good as I thought. And it was always better for him than he expected. Because he was thinking of the worst case scenario through the whole thing. And of course, very little of his worst case scenario actually happened. So it was a big breakthrough for them, just just so simple thing of like going on a vacation. You think that would just be a very easy thing to get together, but it wasn't. So that's just a few illustrations.
Yeah, those are two really good illustrations. How about you, Michelle? When you hear your mother talking about mother-daughter relationships and other relationships, and how has knowing your Enneagram type and hers, and I know you two have been together your whole life, obviously, and you have been part of the Enneagram because she's been so into it, even though it's only been a few years since you became a teacher and coach in the Enneagram. How does knowing your mom's type and your type help with your mother-daughter relationship?
Well, it definitely bridges the gap that we're talking about of love, perceptions, choices, all of that, and how we all play the projection game. And even as a child, I call it looking through life at my three lenses. I'm an Enneagram type 3. And so I'm always looking through life at that with the three lens. And it's hard to not do that, but to recognize and to know that that's what I am doing and that's how I'm seeing things. And then in every relationship, including with my mother, to understand very clearly, this is I agree with Mom, a very basic understanding that eludes a lot of people in their most difficult relationships, that there comes this ability to feel resolution and freedom and clarity and even love when I can say, well, how is she perceiving this situation? If I try to look at it through her lens, it's that classic example of, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And it makes all the difference, because a huge amount of conflict in relationships is we just keep persisting in seeing things through our own lens, and wanting other people, and even sometimes demanding other people to see them through the lens that we see them. And great peace and compassion comes when we can let that go and come together. And I find that my ability to do that as I've grown older with my mother and everyone else has created much more loving, content relationships for myself. And it also, I love, and I have loved practicing the intersection of the Enneagram and our spiritual teachings, the law of attraction. And if I keep persisting in seeing things through the lenses of my own self over and over and over again, I just keep getting the same pattern in my relationships. So I can look around and say, okay, if I'm having a conflict with my mother, what's the genesis of it? And I pretty much can guarantee that any other relationships I'm having conflict in any way, that genesis that I see in that relationship with my mother, that's based on my perceptions and my view of the world and the lenses that I'm wearing right now, I'll bet there's some of that in every other difficult relationship. And when I resolve some of that, when I work with myself in the Enneagram, and I work to heal that, and I work to see from the viewpoint of the other person's perceptions, then I can actually have that pattern begin to dissolve itself and no longer be there. Because I can't say that I've been content all my life in my relationship with my mother. And I bet my mother hasn't been content in her relationship with me our whole life. But we've worked it out because we've been willing to do the work of it.
Yeah. So let's dive into you mentioned that you lead with a type 3. Can you, and your mother leads with type 4. And so can you give us an example of how the lens that you see through and where, and how that might be different to your mother,
Sure. Sure. Yeah, we have one example, like as a type 3, I learned very early on that getting people's approval was important to me, and especially my mother's approval. So I can tell you that throughout my history and my relationship with my mother, anytime that I perceived she was the least bit critical of me, it was heartbreaking for me and hard for me. And I would feel I was disappointing her. And then as I got to be a teenager, I would be angry with her. Now, as we've talked about it, as she and I have talked about it, in those instances, I don't think that my mother is an overly critical person. And in there are a couple of incidents where we talked about she was trying to help me, or she was trying to coach me, or she was doing something out of love. But because of my being a type 3 and needing approval so profoundly when I was young, and even sometimes today it kind of gets hold of me, boy, it was painful for me. It was very painful for me to feel my mother is criticizing me. My mother doesn't like what I'm doing, or how I look, or what I said, or how I did this sort of thing. And it created a distance between us that was based on my perceptions of that. And as I grew older and could see where she was coming from and how she was trying to love me and mother me and support me, then it was a lot less triggering for me, a lot less activating for me. And to the point now where sometimes if she says something that I think is being critical of me, I can stop and go, okay, Michelle, let's test this out. No, I really don't think she's being critical. And if it really hurts me, I'm fortunate to have a mother that I can say to you right now, I can go to my mother with anything that I am upset about, which is part of her superpower as a type 4, and process it with her. In fact, she loves it. My mother isn't as happy if I come to her and say, "Oh, Mom, the weather's so beautiful." I mean, she can appreciate it, but if I come to her and say, "We need to process this thing that I'm frustrated about," oh my gosh, she loves that.
Oh, that's so good. Oh my gosh. I'm looking at the viewer. There's someone that's posting, and it happens to be my daughter Alex, and so I find that really interesting.
That's awesome.
So Linda, when that is so, I can relate, because I love to go deep with my daughter and process through every little aspect of what's going on for her. And the more she engages, the more I'm feeling like, oh yeah, I'm doing my job as a mother here, because I'm really giving her all of my energy, my attention. But I find I'm wondering, my daughter Alex, she might post what type she leads with. I don't want to disclose that unless she wants to, but I can see that I, as a mother, can be very kind of stand backish. Like, I have a strong value of each of my children being their own individual selves. Like, I don't want to paint, my husband uses this term, paint seagulls in someone else's painting. And so I don't want to tell my kids how to think or how they should respond. And so I can be a bit stand backish, and it might be perceived as being a bit aloof or not caring, but I'm really, in my own way of mothering, I feel like I'm creating space for them to be themselves, their own, unique expression of self. But Alex has just posted she leads with type 9. I'm wondering, my mothering, if I give them too much space to create, to be who they are, to come up with their own strategies for coping with things. I don't want to interject or, give too much advice, but just hold the space for them to process, or them to share what's on their mind and heart. Do you relate to that, Linda?
Well, it's interesting when you're saying that. I had a lot of thoughts. First of all, I think it's important for me to mention that I was 16 when I got pregnant with Michelle. So I was not at all aware. Here we're talking about really being aware. I mean, the Enneagram was part of your awareness. The church is part of the awareness, but I was not. I mean, at 16, who is? But I really wasn't. And so I was barely, it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks after my 17th birthday when I had Michelle. So during that time, I was not I there was only one book available in those days for parenting. It was Dr. Spock. It was a pocket book. And, just keeping her alive and all of that. And she was like my doll because I was so young and I had played with dolls till I was 13. So I only had 3 years between my dolls and my baby. And so I was not thinking about how to be a parent, whether I should do this or that or the other. It just didn't even come up. And then I was in a very dysfunctional, all through that time, I was in a very dysfunctional marriage. So it was really more about survival. Now, Michelle was a really bright spot in my life, though. She was just really, and I didn't realize that she was, looking for my approval the way she's just talked about. I didn't know I was looking for approval. And I had a good act. I mean, I really, people didn't, I bought my own act to the point that I didn't even realize that I was that detached. So I think that a lot of Michelle and I do think that one of the things that really helped with Michelle and I is that we were in the same center of the Enneagram. So I was concerned about image, but my image was more about how the house looked. Was it pretty and was it beautiful and all of that? And how did they dress right? And I mean, certainly I loved them and I cared. Now, but this is a big point. I had a second daughter whose name was Noelle. And she was a 6 on the Enneagram. And I didn't know that at the time she was a 6. Michelle was very compliant, agreeable, happy-go-lucky, laughed a lot, giggled a lot. Noelle was like a baby in a high chair going, no. And so she did not benefit, from my approach. And I did try to tell her, try to get her on the right track, try to get, I didn't have to do much of that with Michelle. Michelle was very watchful, looking at how the way it should be and just doing it. But it did not land well with Noelle at all. And there was a struggle. Now, she eventually, she had a hard birth. She had some birth problems from the time she was born. And then she had a mental illness, probably 2 or 3 diagnoses, and she died 4 years ago. And she struggled. And so I had to learn a different way of parenting her. So the 6, learning she was a 6, and that everything I said was just taken as she did not want to hear it. She didn't want to talk about it. She actually would go to her sister, Michelle, and for advice, and she would take things from Michelle much better than she would for me. But the authority issue was such a big deal that I just could not. I should mention that to people who don't know about that. But 6s usually do have an authority issue. We all can. Every type can. But 6s do not want to be told by anybody how they should or shouldn't be. And so that was a whole different way of parenting.
I don't experience, like, as Allie, as you're talking about that aloofness, I'm curious about that because do you think that might have to do with some of the subtype energy? Because I don't feel like mom was aloof like you're talking about, but I do understand that energy that you're talking about in parenting. I think I tend to be more like that with my son. I tend to want to, like, not smother him, and I want him to be himself and to be individual. And I feel like that's somewhat of my four-wing love of authenticity. And it's not that I don't think my mom had some of that, but I don't feel it the same way you're describing. So that is interesting that you're kind of 2 different 4 parents in that regard.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting. And I don't know that we'll get around to this, but Linda and I both lean more towards being self-preservation.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But I think that the difference, even though Linda and I are both self-preservation 4s, I think that I have a strong 5-wing. And so I think, and I don't know where you land with that, Linda, but maybe a stronger 3-wing.
I think during my time as a parent, it was much more 3 and building my business and all. My 5-wing flaps a little more now. And I want to add this other piece because this is something that is complicated when you're trying to find yourself on the Enneagram, but it needs to be mentioned. I had a learning disability I couldn't see until I was about 10, and it wasn't diagnosed. I mean, I could see well enough to walk and talk, and chew gum, but I really couldn't see the blackboard, and I had some learning disabilities from that. And so I think if you had done a typing interview with me when I was a kid, you would have said I was a 5. And then once I got glasses, my personality, it would have been interesting. You know how they have these commercials now where they show the little baby putting on the glasses? That would
really
be so wonderful, because I didn't know I couldn't see. And so that is something when you're trying to find yourself, those of you who are listening, if you're wondering, well, who am I on the Enneagram? We have to consider that background about other factors like that. Like, as I mentioned, my daughter Noelle had some major problems upon birth that really haunted her in many ways. And I had that thing with that. And also, I don't know if we'll have time to talk about this, but I do want to touch on generational psychology when it comes to the Enneagram and all of that, because that makes a big difference too.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back, and Linda will dive a little bit into that generational psychology. Okay, we'll see you in a minute.
Okay.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
We're back, and I'm with Michelle Medrano and Linda Frazee. And Linda, you were talking about generational, was it psychology?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, when it comes to the Enneagram, it's many people, of course, I'm older than both of you by a landslide, but at least 17 years older than Michelle, for sure. So, but our parents have passed. Allie, I know your mother's still alive, so that's an advantage. But even if your parents have passed, it's interesting to look back at least to your parents and their parents to get what Enneagram types they might be. And this is sort of the cardinal sin of the Enneagram, is trying to diagnose somebody's Enneagram type without them finding it themselves. But if they're gone, you can't really do much about it. So using that as an example with my parents, my mother, both my mother and father were raised in poverty. And there's a long story about that I won't go into. So they were struggling. It was during World War II. I was born right after World War II. World War I, they went through that. Their families, they lost a parent. They had ineffective parenting. They had to struggle just to eat. So so that was a major factor on my side, their psychology when it came to me. Before that, take my mother, for example. My mother's mother had some of the mental disorders that my daughter ended up, which is, again, generational psychology. Some of that genetics comes right down the pike. So my parents were highly intellectual. My mother was a 6, my father was a 5. They were creative and hard workers, but they weren't very tactile. They weren't very loving. They weren't like, touchy-feely type with me. They were more so with the grandchildren. So it'd be interesting to have what Michelle says of this. But so here, my mother used to talk about how needy I was. And here I was, this little 4, wanted to be picked up, wanted to be loved. And, I was not mistreated, but it would be like they'd pat me on the head and say, "Oh, honey, you're okay. Here, read a book. Read this book. This book will be fine," And I was like, "Oh, okay." Of course, I could barely read before with my eyes. So there were a lot of things that were a problem. But that need for tactileness from my parents, which the 5 and 6 are not the most tactile. Can they be? Yes. Can they learn? Yes. But they didn't get it. They couldn't give it to me. Mm-hmm. And so, and there was food scarcity for them. Food scarcity, that was a real problem. And so food scarcity became a problem for my family, and then for my children, they came out in lots of different ways. And so it's really interesting to look back, if you can just even imagine, at least get this center that your parents were in, of the 3 centers of intelligence, whether they were the body type, quick to anger or not at all anger if they're a 9, whether they were in the heart type and just going toward with their arms open to you, wanting lots of affection and attention, or whether they were much more in their heads and intellectual. And I was the only one. I have just one brother, and I was the only one in my family who was wanting all that affection.
Mm. Let's talk a little bit about those 3 centers, because it seems very, it's a layer of the Enneagram cake, if you will, that mm-hmm. I think is very important for people to understand, because the heart center is more focused in feelings, the head center in thinking, and the body center in doing. And I would imagine, as you're sharing about your parents, I'm thinking about my own parents, and I think that potentially my mother was in the body center, and so each of us have all 3 centers, but typically one might be a little bit suppressed or dormant. And so I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about that? I know for me, that body center is a little suppressed. I'm less in tune with that, more in the kind of the emotions and the thinking, the emotions and the thinking, and the emotions and the thinking. And so can you share, both of you share a little bit about your insights into the centers and how that impacts our relationships?
Why don't you go ahead, Michelle?
Sure. Well, I do think that it, as we've indicated, it can be a great starting place for people who are just tipping their toe into the Enneagram to begin to identify themselves in one of the centers, as well as what you just said, Allie, about when you have relatives or people that you don't know their type, but you can get sense of it, because each center then has its specific blessings and challenges, just like each type does. And so knowing that can create a little more compassion for myself and my relationships and how I view other people, and also can help me continue to grow and deepen in the Heart Center, which is what I'm happy to be part of the Heart Center. I love being in the Heart Center, and heart and love and connection is very important to me because of my center and my type. But I also, like you, have struggled throughout my life with the body center too, just feeling so out of touch with my body and so disconnected from my body. And like you also can feel the head type, very prevalent, can be a thinker, probably because I know this is another part of the Enneagram. I go across the circle over to that, the 6 over there and the 9. And so I think of those 2, I can really pull into the head center. So I'm a good thinker and can overthink things for sure. But using the the wisdom of the body, which part of what I learned in doing the Enneagram program, in fact, with our group, was how profoundly a body type person like feels things in their body, everything from gut feelings to, I just have a gut feeling about this. And I remember specifically, one of our fellow students in the program saying sometimes when she's heard news that is disturbing to her, she'll immediately get nauseous or feel like she's going to vomit, or her body will have a strong reaction. And I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever had that feeling before. So, so understanding that and being curious, I think curiosity is a huge quality that helps us in our relationships, to say to someone who's having that experience that I'm in a relationship with, tell me more about that, or tell me how you're experiencing that, or what does that say about this conversation we're having right now, is a powerful way to establish greater connection, versus just saying, oh, there goes so-and-so with their stupid gut feelings again. That's where we can get in our relationships if we aren't willing to be in connection. So these 3 elements can help us understand each other and have more curiosity about each other, for sure.
Well,
how about you, Linda?
Well, for me, I'm more in touch with my body and last with my head. So, part of that I think was my learning disability, because I still don't know left and right automatically, even to this day. So anyway, I operate on gut feelings and my body directing me, and very much in touch with my body. But my head, I have to think about, okay, now how am I going to do this? Bless the internet, because that makes it a lot easier. It's like an access for the head to get that information. But I really have to work on that. But this is a big thing, what Michelle was just saying, because that sarcasm that we can have, like, oh, you and your gut feelings, or why didn't you think of that? Why didn't you think about that? And I'm going to add another piece that I'm just discovering recently in the last few weeks about myself. Whatever your weakest center is, as you age, it's going to get worse in that center. So if there's things you can do about that to help that center, be stronger, that's an ideal thing, because I think the center that we're the weakest in is going to, dim the most. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a lot of practices aside from meditation. I love to walk and I love to paint. And so I find that as you're sharing all of that, I'm thinking maybe it isn't that I'm suppressed in the body as much as my head and my body aren't very connected. But when I walk, I find, I don't know, someone has said something about the crossing over of the arms when you're walking. It kind of connects the right and the left side of the brain. I'm thinking that walking helps me to make that connection with what I'm thinking and maybe my gut instinct, that comes online. And that also in painting, the actual physical process of painting relaxes something in me that allows me to have better connection between what I'm feeling like in my body, that gut knowing, and being able to process it through that repetitive meditative process. So I think there are things we can do to bridge those intelligence centers and bring them online so they work together more in a more profound way, like meditation, movement, and so where else should we go with this conversation of building healthier relationships?
I want to add something that just came up that illustrates this point of how I think I'm more in touch with my gut. When I was doing my training for Gestalt therapy, and I was being mentored. I was in a long-term internship, and we were in those days sitting on the floor on pillows. And this was my first one. And the person who was being processed was sitting in the middle of a circle on a pillow. And I was watching and listening. And I began to get some feelings about what was going on with them, because the person who was facilitating, one of the other people, it wasn't getting through. And finally, they turned to me and said, "Okay, what do you think?" And immediately I made my suggestion, and that was a big breakthrough. Right afterwards, they walked with me and said, "How did you know that? You have got to tell us how you knew that." And I'm going, "I don't know how I knew that." Well, you've got to be able to validate, that you did this because you heard that, because that, and basically going logic. And I just had to say, I can't do it. I don't know. It wasn't a thought. It was a knowing that came from my body. And that's still to this day, mostly what my work is with people is right out of my body. It's a knowing and, intuition, it pops up and I have no idea how I know. Now I've gained a lot more knowledge over these last 43 years that I probably am using, pulling in memory, but it's still coming from my body.
I'm curious as for you fours, how does the heart center show up most profoundly for you in your relationships?
Well, I'm thinking as this conversation is fabulous, by the way, because I'm rethinking everything I thought about these three centers. I'm thinking that the heart shows up to create a disturbance and a connection between the two. Like if I'm in an emotionally challenged space, and for me, it's the feeling of discontent. Like there's something missing, there's something wrong, there's something I don't have that I need, and so that emotional disturbance can disconnect the head from the gut. Like I don't have clear awareness. I'm not listening to that gut instinct and processing it here because there's an emotional, blockage, if you will.
Okay.
What do you think about that, Linda?
That's interesting because the way that, and Michelle has seen me with this, so she knows this, my emotions get triggered by technology. I get really upset with technology because, first of all, because of my my history of not being able to see, I'm not visual, I'm auditory. So I don't remember where things are on a computer. Like you always go to this and you do that. I mean, I've learned to do some, but and then if I push the wrong button and the whole thing goes, I'm just totally disturbed, just completely. And I can't think, and I'm just practically in crisis. I mean, I've had people work with me on a computer and like for an hour, and they're saying, "Well, I think we work for another hour." And I'm going, "No, I cannot do another hour." I'm like, oh, it just, that's what really gets me there. It's just, it's a major thing. But I would say that the way I'm in this new relationship with another heart type, and it is magnificent because of the love from one heart to another. That because my former husbands have not been in that center together, and that makes such a world of difference. It's a major thing. Now, I'm not saying everybody should be in a relationship with somebody who's in their center, because sometimes that doesn't work. I think, and I wouldn't say that my other relationship, my prior one, didn't work. It did, but it is a major thing. And I know your husband is a 2 as well, Allie. So you know about that. It's just a different kind of connection.
Yeah, truly is. So let's talk a little bit about the different types, like heart type and a head type in a relationship. What does the head type need to what's the challenges with a head type and a heart type? Let's dive into that a bit. What could the heart type feel is missing in the head type, and how might that be grown or improved?
Well, for me, I think it's when I've had challenges with other head type people, it's feeling as though my feelings are not heard. And I think we've maybe kind of gone, maybe one of the examples that Mom gave earlier, like if I say I'm feeling really hurt, and then I'm told what I should think about, or what aren't you thinking about, or didn't you even think about this, versus, oh, I hear that you're hurt. Like head types and heart types, I think, can kind of miss each other in the conversation.
So the head type might go straight to the strategy of overcoming that versus acknowledging the feeling. Yes. Interesting. And Linda, how would that be the opposite way around? What might the heart type, how would that influence the heart type with the head type?
Well, I want to add something to that, though. A one, who's called the perfectionist or the reformer in the Enneagram system, is really not a head type, but they act very often like a head type because they're so going to data information. And that's something I see a lot that happens with a couple. So this would be really a body type. This is the one, which again, I want to stress is a body type, but they feel it like that's not right. So I was with a couple just the other day, and I don't know for sure, but I think the fellow is a one, and he was with his wife. And she would say things like, well, we went to the store last Tuesday. He'd say, no, it wasn't Tuesday. It was Monday.
Mm.
And that was really important for him to make sure that the right information, and of course, we didn't care what day they went to the store. It didn't matter at all. And it didn't matter to her either. But that can get in the way because of one, it has to be correct. That's the way they feel safe, is the right information. And that can also be for a head type. That could be for the 5, 6, or 7. The 7 is less worried about it being exact, accurate. But the 5 and the 6, they feel like, it's got to be, you got to give the right information because that's how I feel safe. And so that could be a big disconnect, from a heart type who's going, I just want a hug. Well, it's not the right time. You get hugged when you go to bed at night. This isn't the right time, And so I think we have to look at that kind of disconnection that can happen.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think when I had this image when you asked Mom that question, Allie, for me, because I am married to a person who is a one type. I had this image of when you have a small child who's having a temper tantrum or having an overwhelmed emotion, and you try to give them logic. And even though the logic is correct, the child can't see it. So you can say the child might be screaming, saying that, that dog was trying to bite me and I'm scared. And the other person is going, no, the dog isn't biting you. The dog did not try to bite you at all. And for me, as a feeling type, I sometimes feel like that as a heart type in my relationship with my one husband is that my emotions have overcome and he's trying to give me logic, and his logic is sound. It's adult logic, no question. He's right. And I can't hear it. I can't, and it doesn't penetrate and it doesn't comfort me. And I'm not making him wrong for that. But for me, the opposite of what you're saying is true. Like even as an adult, if my heart space has overcome me in some way, then I'm incapable at times of hearing and getting the logic in a way that will impact me, because could do that. Me could go, okay, calm down, he's right. But it's like some part of me sometimes boils over, and then I end up feeling kind of stupid, because it's like, why did I get so upset over that? Because he's absolutely right. There wasn't anything there at all. And I think that's what can happen in that opposite situation.
Yeah, big emotions get.
Yes.
And so what about the body types, aside for the 1, the 8 and the 9? What would the body types, how would that show up within a relationship, let's say with a heart type or a head type? Where could there be some blind spots for a relationship for a body type with the other 2 types?
Well, I would say the lack of action, because like Michelle just gave a good illustration, when she's overwhelmed with emotion, you don't want to take action, then you can't. I mean, you're just caught up in it. We all 3 know what that's like. And so the 8 would be saying, come on, come on, take some action. Well, don't sit here. So go tell the person what you really think. Speak up, do blah, blah, blah. And, and like, what are you, what's the problem? Because 8 is all about, if I'm upset, take action right away. And, or maybe they will even defend you, which could be inappropriate. You're upset because you thought the dog was going to, they're going to go get the dog. I'll make this go away. I'll take this action because we don't want any of that. Whereas the 9 is more likely to go inside and not take action. And so then they don't know what to do. Oftentimes 9s, because they can get overwhelmed themselves. If you're overwhelmed, it's like they're very good at compassion. They care, and they may put their arm around you or something, but it could be overwhelming for them. They don't know what to do. Or they may just join you in it. You're crying, they're crying too, which is okay. That's a good way of compassion too. But the 9 goes inside because they're afraid of any anger or any upset that might happen, whereas the 8 just goes toward it and will create it, and be the big protector. So I'm going to go get one.
I have a friend or coworker who's a 9 with a pretty strong 8 wing, and sometimes he can get snarky like an 8 when other people are upset. I've watched him get
Interesting. Now we're coming to the end of our time. I can't believe it.
Oh my goodness.
And I know that you have a mother-daughter workshop coming up. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how people can find out more about getting involved with that?
Yes. We both are working together because I believe, and I think Mom believes too, that people sometimes don't realize how impactful their relationship with their mother has been and how it's created perceptions about themselves. If I had not worked on myself, I would probably walk around thinking that I was unacceptable to lots of people because I was this little approval addict and, thinking I hadn't gotten it and that sort of thing. And so I think that we don't understand how that's part of generational psychology. So if we have woundology, unhealed stuff with our mother, don't think for a minute you don't bring that stuff into your work relationships, into your friendships, into your romantic partnerships, because it comes with you until you learn to smooth it out a little bit. So we're doing a 4-week session to help people to deal with it a little bit more. What do you want to say about it, Mom?
Right. And we're going to touch on more about all these things we've touched on here today, as far as, I think, as Michelle has said, there's almost every parent and child, there's some kind of a wound. You can't escape that. Now, some wounds are deeper than others. Some are long-lived, some were short. One of my earliest clients came to me, at a girl about 14, and her issue was that her parents were so perfect that she didn't think she could be perfect herself. So kids are going to have a wound no matter what. But I think it's really profound, even if your mother isn't alive, if she's passed on, or, if she's got dementia and you can't really talk to her anymore, really looking at what did go down, what was that generational psychology, where did she come from, where did she learn some of her habits, where is she on the Enneagram to the best of your ability, just guessing, how did you disconnect, and how can you heal that? So it's about understanding all that and then looking at different ways that you can either work with yourself or work with her if she's still alive, or, just even do a worksheet that will help and some processes. So that's the idea.
Beautiful.
And it's 4 Monday nights. They're listed there on that flyer, November 3rd and 17th, December 1st and 15th, 5:30 to 7 online, because we want to help with every different time zones to be able to join us. So that 5:30 to 7 is Mountain Time. So depending on where you are, you can adjust it. And then the flyer has information about how to reserve your spot. It's $100, and we look forward to having anybody who'd like to join us. Be there.
Awesome. Well, it looks fabulous. I'll have to talk to my daughter and see if she wants to join me in doing that.
It'd be
I don't know if you encourage mothers and daughters doing this type of work together.
Sure.
We'd love to have you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, for this wonderful, really revealing conversation. I look forward to working with you in the future, and I'm so glad to have been able to bring you here to introduce you together in this amazing work with our guests here. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that you got a lot out of this, or at least you started to think about how you show up in your relationships and some of the struggles or the sticking points that might occur when you're trying to show up the way you do and your partner doesn't receive it in the way you'd like. There's so much to learn about ourselves in relationship with others. And I know the Enneagram is an amazing tool and a guide and a path to greater personal discovery. Thank you to New Thought Media Network for producing this show. And thank you to the Satya Center for sponsoring this episode and all episodes. See you next time. Lots of love. Mwah.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious conscious life on the growing edge.